Hey, David Aiken here with Checkerhead Brewing. Welcome to another episode of Tips and Tricks for Homebrewers around the world. This is my chance to share with you some of the information that I've picked up since I first started brewing so that you can avoid the mistakes that I made and so that you can sort of benefit from some of the experience that I've had. Today we're going to be talking about fermenters. We're going to talk about 3 different types and the benefits and drawbacks to each one. We're going to start with these plastic fermenters. Now, if you just got a homebrew kit at a homebrew store, you likely have gotten one of these 5-gallon plastic buckets. These are food-grade plastic. They have a good seal with the lids that are on top of them. Or maybe you came from the world of wine and you've got one of these bigger plastic buckets. They're a great place to start because they're super cheap, super economical, but they do have their drawbacks. On these bigger buckets, the seal is not that great, so you're inevitably getting sort of air getting in, not just CO2 coming out. On these smaller buckets, the seals are a lot better, generally speaking a lot better, and you can put an airlock and a bung in them. But inevitably what happens after 5 or 6 brews is that the plastic on the inside ends up, you get the crusting from the yeast at the top, and as you try to scrape that off or wash that off, you end up scratching the plastic. In that plastic scratch, you end up getting some kind of an infection, and no matter how hard you try to sanitize, that infection's always there. So when you put a brand new beer in, that bug that's in the scratch gets into that beer and you run a huge chance of infecting an otherwise great beer. And so after a little while, these end up being sort of storage for other things because you don't want to risk spoiling a batch of beer with something in a scratch in that plastic bucket. Let's go to the next one, shall we? So glass carboys are probably the next place you go. This is actually the very first carboy I ever had. It's a 1-gallon or about 4-liter carboy that came with a Brooklyn brew kit, a brew your own beer kit, which is how I first got started into home brewing. It came with this and everything you needed for an all-grain batch of beer, which was really cool. Now, the advantage that you have with these glass carboys is that you can't scratch the inside. The glass is a much better surface so that you're not going to run that chance of an infection. It's also good that these airlocks fit in really easily, so you can get a 5 or a 6-gallon. They come in smooth or these sort of bumpy sort of pattern versions as well. And these bungs work out really well in terms of keeping the bugs out and the beer in. So the CO2 is going to get vented out really well, which is fantastic. And when it comes time to cleaning these, I drop some OxyClean into these, let it soak for about an hour at a good hot temperature, and then everything just comes out magically, and then rinse it a few times. So you've got a really clean vessel, which is fantastic. Now, the drawback to these, they're a little bit more expensive than the plastic buckets, which is, you know, understandable. But the bigger problem is they're made of glass. And there's a good chance at some point during your career as a brewer that you're going to slip, one of these is going to break. Now, I've had 2 of these break on me over the years, and I was really lucky that there wasn't any beer in them at the time, but they do break. For me, I broke a couple while I was washing them and cleaning them, but they're heavy. You can get the handles for them, which is great, but they are heavy, and just moving them around, you run the risk of bumping into something, the glass being a bit fragile, and cracking it, breaking it, and losing a batch of beer that way. And you don't want to have a carboy crack in and around your beer and then try to salvage the beer. It's just not worth it. If you lose one of these with a batch in it, that batch is gone, which is sad. And finally, let's move on to the option that I eventually graduated to. I went from plastic to glass and then glass to stainless steel. And this is like a professional brewery. Stainless steel is absolutely a dream to work with. This particular fermenter is put out by SS Brewtech, but you can find them through Anvil Brewing. Grainfather puts out one. There are a number of different homebrew options for these stainless steel fermenters, and they're fantastic. Now, this is great because it's not actually a full-blown fermenter, it's a brew bucket, they call it. So it's basically like the plastic buckets, just made out of stainless steel. And what makes these even better is that they have conical bottoms, just like you'd have on a fermenter at a brewery. Not only that, spigot here, so you can test. It's got like a tiny little racking arm in it, so you can check your gravity as the fermentation is going along, which is fantastic. Also, I love that they have huge lids on the top, so if you're dry hopping, you can get your dry hops in and out really easily. I use a mesh bag for my hops so that I can put them in. String comes over the side here, then after 4 or 5 days, I can pull them straight out. and then any hop matter will collect to the bottom, which is just a dream. So this is fantastic also when it comes time to cleaning, because it's virtually impossible to scratch stainless steel. You can, but it's, you know, you can buff it out, you can clean it out. You can't do that with plastic. Chances of it breaking like glass don't exist. Now the drawback, of course, is the price of entry. But trust me, it is well worth the price of admission if you plan on home brewing for any length of time. Stainless steel is going to save you headaches left and right. You'll avoid infections from scratches in plastic buckets. You'll avoid the chance of breaking glass like you would from a glass carboy. They're easy to clean, and they're just a dream to work with. Best investment I've made in brewing in quite some time. Well, maybe one of the best investments I've made in brewing in my career, and I would highly recommend it to anyone out there. I'll put links to all these 3 different kinds of fermenters in the notes below, so check that out. And hey, if you like the video, hit the like button, hit subscribe if you like. If you have any thoughts or questions or concerns, let me know that too. Just leave a comment, I'll get right back to you, and I'll make sure that I do my best to explain what I've talked about so that you get the most out of it and you can move forward in your brewing career as well. Thanks for watching. My name's David Aiken for Checkerhead Brewing. We'll see you next time.